Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I want to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we'll make them available on our website. Next slide, please. Today we are thrilled to introduce Charles Battle, Director, Global Technical Service Information over at ACO. Charles has held his current position at ACO for 3 years. Prior, he worked in Technical Information Management and Technical Publications for 10 years in a division of Toyota Industrial Equipment. Charles overall has 20 years experience of increasing responsibility in managing the development and distribution of technical information in a variety of different industries, ranging from digital wireless systems to heavy equipment to microelectronics capital equipment. His teams have been awarded the Society of Technical Communications International Distinguished Award, as well as the Rare Bird Award from the Center for Information Development Management. He holds undergraduate degrees in electronics technology and management, as well as a graduate degree from Syracuse University's School of Information Studies. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. DCL serves a broad client base. Without further ado, welcome Charles.
Hi Adam, thanks for the introduction. So AGCO here, we've got the slide for AGCO. We're a Fortune 500 company, and we're in the agricultural equipment business. We've been considered the only pure play agricultural equipment business traded or Fortune 500 pure play ag equipment. And we have lots and lots of brands. You can see in the middle there we've got our 5 major brands, and then we have lots and lots of legacy brands. Some of them are listed here, other ones aren't. So if you see an old tractor, it's oftentimes one of the AGCO brands, oftentimes. And it's all about the tractor. I always like to put this slide in here. We make very large tractors. We're very good at it, lots of different brands. And as you can imagine, being in the tractor business, that brings a different spin on things as compared to other types of industries. Here's a slide I like to include. I give seminars and things at conferences and whatnot, and I can tell you I always see somebody's data silo slide. There's always one, it seems like, in every presentation, in every conference in information management. And this one is my data silo slide, but in actuality these are silos that we sell. These are AGCO division GSI silos, so I encourage you when you're putting together your conference slides for some venue, you go to our website and there's nothing preventing you from grabbing one of these photographs for use in your presentation. So we're the same as everybody else, thinking in silos. So some of the things that are kind of particular to AGCO or of importance are the pressures that we have as far as our technical information. We have cost and margin issues. Everybody's got cost and margin issues, but we're in a mature industry here, so we've had lots of time to have competition develop over many years, and these margins and costs are quite the pressure. AGCO also has a design anywhere, build anywhere strategy, which means we need to be modular and portable with our intellectual property, including technical service information. So we have to follow where the action is, and we have to be able to open up and manage and edit and manipulate information from one side on one side of the world and do the same thing on the other side of the world, and of course in different languages commonly. We have 3,200 dealers globally, so we've got a large base selling in approximately 140 countries currently. And I'd like to think that agricultural equipment is probably as pervasive as any other industry. Pretty much every place in the world things grow. Our tractors are used on every continent, including Antarctica. So it's quite pervasive. I compare it to cell phones. I think cell phones are pretty much used pretty much anywhere in the world, and it's got a huge coverage. We currently author in 5 languages, and we publish in 32 or so languages. So we have a bit of a matrix or a web thinking as far as languages in, languages out kind of management dilemmas. AGCO is also financially segregated by regions. Now this is common for lots of global companies, lots of big global companies, and it's something that you need to consider, I think, because it does create some business case complexity when you're coming up with an ROI for any kind of project, including conversion projects or authoring system business case. It's common, but it's not something that you should disregard. Our products, we have lots of legacy products, like I was saying, with long service life. It's not uncommon to see our products being used 30 years or more into the future or in the past, whichever way you want to look at it. We actually do furnish currently horse-drawn equipment to collectors and perhaps some Amish folks that we have in service life still. So it's got a lot of depth, a lot of history. AGCO has been a high growth company, which is a little bit interesting for an agricultural equipment business. We've grown through acquisitions. A 25-year-old company, and we're having our anniversary. I think it was just a couple of days ago, 25-year anniversary of our company. We like to say we have 260 years of experience with all our brands. So our responses to these pressure in my area of the business, service information, we want to use automation and tools wherever possible. We couldn't possibly hire enough staff to do what we used to do in the old days, to do what we do nowadays. So we try and automate, and there's a lot of opportunity to do so. It's not creative writing. This is stuff. This is data and information, and we can split it up and manage it like that. We also like to use on integration as one of our responses, and what I mean by that is we like to figure out where the overlaps are in our organization and in the value chain, as I would call it, from when you're taking your data and you're enriching it and making it more valuable. Look at those processes and try and figure out where you can do the integration, remove the overlaps. Of course, process development is very important. Flow charts, swim lane diagrams, super important. Find out where your waste is. Find out where you can make some improvements. Standards. I'm a big fan of standards. I think that I'm not alone in that kind of thinking with standards. So we use all sorts of them, ISO standards, you name it. We use DITA 1.2 currently, and lots of other standards. ISO 3600 is a standard for operators' manuals for the tractor industry, believe it or not, and we adhere to that one. We also use best practices, and I think it's important to consider best practices with a company like AGCO, perhaps in your own place of employment, is best practices internal or external. I mean, ideas, good ideas, come from inside, they come from outside, they come from everywhere, and it's up to you and your team to decide what's a good idea, what's a good practice, what's the best practice, and adopt that one. In our case, we've had the best ideas come from internally. Some of the best ideas come internally, some of them come from externally, but it's in corners of the organization. It's not usually, or it's not always one site that comes up with the best way to do everything. So some of the best ideas come from some of the most obscure places, if you will, And it's best to make sure that you're identifying those and not just walking over them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So here's where we are and where we've kind of been. This particular slide tells a big story as how it relates to conversions and consolidation. A few years ago, we were over at the left-hand side of this, and those are city names or town names around the world, and sites where authoring was happening. We have more sites than this. We have about 15 sites authoring. And we all started from different places pretty much. We had a few overlapping, but we weren't necessarily getting the reuse we wanted, even in the ones that we were having some common authoring done. And we started from everything. Page Maker, Frame Maker, Structured Frame Maker, Microsoft Word, XML, Data XML, Topic-Based XML, you name it, it goes on and on. You name the format, we had it, or we have it in our legacy. I don't think that there's an exception. Interleaf, InDesign, on and on. So we've had a fair share of complexity there. We've moved beyond that pretty well, and we're really looking good as far as future global authoring, global reuse, and getting things all well sorted out from this huge difference of source material. So, you know, we've had a lot to think about as far as this goes, and this is an important slide to show you. So the dilemma comes up when we're looking at converting. I think one of the first things you have to ask yourself is, do you convert or rewrite, or do you ignore? I think there's a lot of thinking that has to go on in this area. I've seen in our community, in our industry, everything from people with opinions that everything can be converted automatically through computer algorithms, all the way to don't waste your time. You need to rewrite everything anyway. So there's this huge continuum from the far left to the far right as far as converting or rewriting. And so it does require a lot of analysis, and you're going to have to make some very significant decisions here. I think that part of it is you know, where you're going to. A lot of folks are going to Data XML nowadays. You may not be, but there's certainly a lot of migration to Data XML. So you're going to have to ask yourself, what do you have as far as task-based information now? Are you minimalized is the second thing. Because DITA from its very core, its early beginnings, was around the thinking of minimalism and efficiency of information. So you may want to think about that, where you're coming from and where you're going along that continuum. I think the other thing that's really important is how much consistency do you have, and I'll probably mention that a number of times before we get to the end of this webinar, because it really does make a big difference as far as the consistency. So you can have something that a huge repository of material that was written in Microsoft Word using paragraph tags, and maybe you had it done by one person who was really well disciplined and very uptight about the paragraph tagging they used, and you may be able to have an excellent, very easy, very straightforward conversion path out of that Word paragraph tag into Data XML. I'm saying it's possible. You're going to have to look at that. As is often the case, you have a lot of different people writing different things with different styles. So it depends on your quality, your style guide, and the disciplines, and all that is going to make a big difference. So you're going to have to decide whether or not you can automate this Do you have the consistency to automate? And the other thing is, you know, even if it's not 100% consistent, you could set up rules to cover the inconsistency a lot of times, and DCL can help you do that. But you have to decide what's worth going after. There's a curve of diminishing returns. So do you want to get the big chunks done and move ahead and do some manual rewrites, or do you want to kind of publish with these wrappers or these tags for now and then clean it up later, that kind of thinking? I think another thing you're going to have to decide of whether or not you can do it internally or externally. Can your current staff do this now? Can you rewrite it? Can you convert it in-house? Or do you need to have somebody convert it or rewrite it externally? I think those things are all fair questions that you're going to have to ask. And of course, the costs and benefits of doing it each way. The only thing I know for sure is the last thing is your mileage will vary. One of my kind of professional hobbies is meeting with people from different industries and seeing how they manage their information, their technical information like this. And everybody's got a different story. And it's a different way of doing things, almost everybody I talk to. And you learn a great deal when you talk to these folks. And your mileage will vary. I don't say it may vary, it will vary. Because there's just so many variables that we're talking about. We have everything from people who are sitting down writing novels, or people that are gifted amateurs at technical writing with lots of consistency. You have such variety just in one department oftentimes. So it's really important that you get statistical evaluation of your source content, as well as have some really good discussion and really do some analysis and spend some time up front. And the more time you spend up front, depending on the size of your source content, is going to be a payoff. So if you have a huge amount of source content that you're thinking about converting, you're going to have to spend more time in analysis, more time, more money, whatever, more effort. Very important. So we spent a lot of time on this, and we spent a lot of time with DCL working through this as well. DITA is semantic tagged, as you're probably aware, so a lot of the writing doesn't fit with that nowadays too. I mean, you have a paragraph tag, and you may have a mixed concept and a mixed reference and a mixed task, and you need to separate those. How easy is that going to be able to pull out that semantic difference of that information? You know, is it a task? You know, and what a task would involve as far as an information type and a concept and a reference. Very common, they're all muddled together, even in structured authoring, as compared to DITA. So you're going to have to look at that. You know, I highly encourage you to do this. We spent quite a time in Brazil one time. We were looking at converting some content in Brazil and doing the analysis of whether or not we could convert it or what we should do for converting it. And we went through a number of exercises of looking at the cost versus the effort of doing it. So in this particular model, we had the 0 to 100, which was total rewrite, and then the cost. And then we did it again and again. You have to take some statistic samples. If you have a large content repository, you know, or file structure or folder structure or whatever, you're going to have to look through there and statistically grab samples and go through them and decide how much effort is it going to be. It's best to do it again and again, and you'll get closer and closer, but you're going to have to make some assessments and you're going to have to make some judgments. So in this example, we have here, we came up with two different processes on this particular source content to a particular target content. And we looked at this as $3 a page, cut and paste, labor hours. This cut and paste thing is a bit of a misnomer because you're essentially rewriting. You could almost say cut and paste is rewriting. I think that you folks are probably very aware of once you get something open and cutting and pasting, you're reading it anyway, or you ought to be, and you're going to be making changes, especially if you have to move it into semantic tag structure. So you're going to have to think of that. So, and then we established a quality rating out of that and determined essentially a cost-quality metric. And we could come up with these two different points here and decide which way was the better way, both in cost and quality. So you get to make the decision of how much this cost to quality is going to be to you. And that quality is exactly what I'm saying. It's a qualitative measurement. And sometimes in the technical writing community, you might try and get things a little bit too good. Sometimes we see that. You're going to have to determine what's acceptable, what isn't. What gets the point across? How does this pay back the company? And then the cost associated with that. You're going to have to look at some outside help. I think is a good exercise. Certainly we did with DCL. DCL has converted to a portion of our content, a large portion of our content. And DCL has a great deal of expertise in documentation. And that's why we went with them. They have good name brand recognition. I consider them to be a name brand supplier. I did not want to, in my particular case, I did not want to be taking a lot of chances with somebody who very well might be able to do it, but might not have the amount of experience doing it. DCL's been around as long as, I don't know, data, I guess. Adam could probably tell us more about that. Tons of experience, lots and lots of experience in it. And they also have expertise in data, which was helpful for us because my team, a lot of our team members are just moving or were just moving over to data, and it's a new way of thinking. So if we had a data advocate on the conversion side, they helped us recognize problems before we saw there were problems. And then, of course, this careful preliminary work with samples. The statistical evaluations, doing the analysis up front, grabbing sample lots, because you're going to have documents that vary a lot across your content repository. It's also important, I think, to make the cut, if you will. I think that there's a common thread I see with a lot of documentation teams is they don't know how to throw stuff away. You probably don't need to convert all your legacy material to go into the future. As much as you like it and as much as you enjoy it, it might not be useful in the future. You probably have the output. You have a PDF output. You might have HTML output already. Do you really need that source material for future work? You could just leave that output material the way it was for reference, or for your records management, retention policy type of stuff. So I encourage you to make a list. This will make things a lot more practical for you. Is if you tag some of this stuff, or earmark some of this stuff as yes, we're moving this source content forward, and no, we are not moving this source content forward. I've talked to a number of people that just say, well, we're going to convert everything. Well, you could, but it's going to save you a lot of money if you don't have to convert everything. It's also going to give you a smaller statistical lot to work with when you start doing some analysis of how that conversion is going to go. If you're starting from paragraph tags and you're moving into semantic XML tags, getting that amount you need to convert down is going to help you. If you're going to try and, they say nowadays, people say boil the ocean, convert everything, you may not need to do that. Maybe you do, but I doubt it. I doubt it, because you probably have the output anyway. So we worked with DCL doing some this analysis. We gave DCL our information model and some samples, and they went back and worked on it, and came back with some initial thoughts that we hadn't considered of, which was very helpful, and had to work through a number of issues. Very good stuff. There was things in our information model that, like I was saying, we didn't have the data expertise at the time, and we continue to grow that every day, and we got some good input on that. Of course, you're going to need a PDF, maybe not of course, but having that output, whatever it was, HTML or PDF, as a sample output to make sure that you are separating your layout, your page layout, and your content. We have to remember that the data XML is not about the output format, it's about the source content, and it's about the semantic tagging. So we're talking apples and oranges a lot of times, and this thinking with data is pure information and formatting comes later is something that you have to wrestle with. And along those lines, you have to remember that you're not just converting, oftentimes if you're moving to data XML, that you're not just moving between different file types. You're not moving from an interleave file type to a FrameMaker file type or Microsoft Word to PageMaker or something like that. You're moving, the actual information or the data elements of an information set. So it's not just this file type you're moving. We're not just changing the extension on file names. You're actually repackaging information and data. So very helpful working hand in hand with DCL as far as helping us climb that ladder of data expertise, asking the right questions and pushing back and with, oh yeah, I guess you are right. Yeah. So, yeah, like I was saying, the PDF and XML for the manuals, having that source stuff, and envision how we map that, the XML tags to data tags in our case. And we have a case study here. This was a case of example where we work together with DCL. We meet together on a weekly basis and we go through some of these technical issues that we come up with. Well, we had this particular case come up where in our source text, in our source data, we had a p-text tag. And we used this to separate paragraphs. Even though we didn't even realize it, we did. And this gives you an example of it. So here's on the left-hand side there, you'll see the XML markup. And on the right-hand side, you'll see how visually it presented itself. So visually, we have two paragraphs there in a note. And it's important. In this case, most anybody could understand that having two paragraphs in a note might be useful. It's something that we're accustomed to using here. And certainly I see value in it because notes may have two important parts in a note. So the XML markup on the other side, we had two p-texts inside one para. We had the major wrapper of para, well, the major wrapper of note, but then the next para and then p-text, two instances of p-text. Well, as we move this over to DITA, DITA doesn't support in its information, in its tagging structure, at least the way I look at it. Somebody smarter than me is probably going to tell me otherwise, but in the essence of DITA thinking, we want to separate the information, this data structure, information model from what it looks like on a page or what it looks like on a website. So what we decided to do was, in this case, DCL was very helpful in suggesting that we move. We retag para to the P tag, which we did, and then we used a PH tag as a subparagraph tag. And then we could use the PH tag with a different output class, so it could be rendered as a new line. And this worked for us, and it was DCL who suggested we could do this. Looking at our information model and looking at the PDF output, they can make that recommendation for us to give us the same visual outlook or visual output that we wanted. And I guess that's pretty much it. So I guess we could take questions at this point, Adam.
Great, thank you, Charles. The first question that has come in is, when or how does retranslation costs of converting content come into play?
Excellent question. It's an excellent question. In our case, retranslation, so in our case, we had up to 32 languages, so of course that's a huge deal. You can't just reformat everything or retag everything and expect that not to have a hit multiplied by 32 as in all your output languages. So that is a very big deal, and it requires a lot of attention. We have handled it in a couple of different ways. One of the ways was that our translation supplier, primarily SDL, and our tool supplier, primary SDL, we worked together to negotiate that to be a win-win situation. I think that's probably the most fundamental way we've attacked it. The other way is we've gone through and done analysis of leverage loss, and we continue to go through a leverage loss type of analytics with our language service provider, which has been very fruitful. And of course, you want to do that analysis up front. So yes, looking at your leverage loss in your language translation may be very important. And like I was saying earlier, another excellent reason not to try and move everything from the past into the future. Be honest, be smart about what you're going to move forward, because you don't want to have to pay translation costs for multiple languages moving forward. Great question. I'd like to talk, if somebody wanted to talk to me more about that, I could probably learn something from them as well. Great question.
Great. Thank you, Charles. The next question has come in is, what is the hardest part about deciding if you can convert or not?
I think the big thing is there's no level of certainty. You're going to have to make a decision. You're going to need some decisiveness. You're going to have some generalization, a little bit of faith, and you're going to have to reach out to people who've been there, done that, and do some trusting. I think that's probably the hardest thing that might be for people. I think the other thing that's important is, do you really want to convert everything at once? You got to ask yourself, do I need to convert this terabyte of information and then look at it 2 years from now? My thinking is not. I've talked to some people before where they've done that and they end up with a useless blob, and it's 2 years before they get into it to realize that what was converted really isn't useful. So having a continuous stream of translated material at something that's reasonably comparable to your consumption rate is smart. If you just do it, put it in a big blob, look at it 2 years later, after you paid for it, is probably not the best strategy. Work with your conversion process to try and get that flow something that you can consume and analyze, at least on a statistical basis, to make sure you've got something good.
Thank you, Charles. The next question has come in is, Should conversion by a third party involve effort to understand the original content, especially when the software products are complex by nature?
Yeah, I think that's a decent question too. You know, it was funny. Over this past weekend, I was thinking about some fun I had many years ago with indexes. Um, Years ago, I was convinced indexes were the solution to information overload as we know it today. This is before the World Wide Web even. And I still think that's true, although it doesn't get prime time nowadays. And the reason why I find this applicable, this index thinking around that question, is that I talked to an expert indexer. I interviewed him. I wanted to pick his brain. What goes into indexing? And this indexer, he used to index fascinating works. I mean, some of the most fascinating stuff ever written. He did uh, the reports like of space shuttle, the original, you know, the space shuttle disaster. Um, and he indexed the report, the final report of that. So, you know, he was a master indexer, and the first thing that he did as an indexer, as an expert indexer, is he read the entire document, and he got an understanding of what was important to the user by detecting what the purpose is and all this great fundamental communication stuff. And I always thought that was really good advice. So I think in this case it's very applicable because I know the folks at DCL take a very similar approach. They'll look at it first, read it, and get the understanding of what the overall purpose is, and so they can help guide to a good decision. That's another good question. I like that one. Very provocative.
Thank you, Charles. The last question has come in at this time is it better to convert everything at once or a little at a time?
Yeah, I spoke to that. I think that personally, I think that you should do it on a level. You should convert at a rate that somehow you can relate to your consumption of it. If you have everything converted at once, let's say you have a terabyte converted, and you don't get to look at it, do some quality analysis years later after it's paid for, you're not doing your own incoming quality inspection you would do. So, you know, even if it's statistical level of incoming, I suggest you do that. That's not to say there wouldn't be an exception to that. For example, if you had a very, let's say it was, you know, something that was very predictable content that you had source, and maybe it was like part numbers or tab delimited files or something like that. Maybe not the written word, you know, the paragraphs and all this soft stuff. You know, maybe you could do that conversion, you know, or and get away with it en masse. Here's a good example: the graphics conversion. Let's say you went to DCL and you said, "I want all these graphics converted. Here's all the input. I don't know what the input is, but the output has to be 200 pixels by 600 pixels, and it has to be this color depth." And you give that requirement to DCL, yeah, you're going to get it. So, you know, that one you could probably trust. So again, your mileage will vary, but I would do it. My best advice to somebody is do it, convert at a rate that you can do the incoming quality inspection as you go along, because both you, the consumer, the customer, and DCL are going to get smarter about what that content is. And I have that word heuristics in there, is every time you do an analysis, you're going to get better and better, and you're going to reform your algorithm. And I think you need to budget for that. You're going to get better and better at it.
Thank you, Charles. The next question has come in is, Charles, did all of your ACO units, U.S. and abroad, participate in the content analysis, discussion, and conversion processes? What roles did the different groups play?
In our case, our content has come from so many different sources. You know, going to the AGCO information model and DITA 1.2 as our target, we came from so many different different formats and writing styles and everything. So yes, we've had the discussion. with every source type, and the discussion has been different every time. So, we've done some really good analysis, really technical analysis in some sites and with some authors and some source file types, and on other ones, we've said, forget it, we're just going to rewrite everything. We're just going to tough it up and rewrite what we wanted in the future. We're going to use this as a guide, but we're going to rewrite it. You have to look at the cost, and like that earlier question is if you have 32 languages, you're going to have to really look hard at that if you're going to have leverage loss there. But yeah, we've had that discussion at every site, I think. Depending on where the source was coming from, it's been a real mixed bag for us here. It certainly wasn't a discussion that we could have everybody in one global discussion, because it's too specialized per site, per source, per discipline, per style guide, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Charles. The next question has come in is, if you convert over the long haul versus upfront, how does one write a business plan to determine a project for upper management to understand?
That's a good one. I think one of the things is you're probably talking about a multi-year project. If you're not talking about a multi-year project, that's another story. Multi-year projects have to be broken up per year. I mean, that's the way businesses are. So you're going to attack one portion of it this year. You're going to attack one portion of it next year. Putting the whole ROI on a multi-year project is going to be interesting depending on your organization. Does your company look at a 5-year project as a 5-year ROI? Or does your company look at it quarter by quarter, spend versus return? And so it's going to vary by your organization. But what I would suggest, probably in most cases, you're going to be looking at year-over-year return on investment, and I think that's the easiest way to sell it anyhow. So try and look at that, or what return you're going to get the next year or this year on dollars spent versus dollars saved, or the revenue created from that. It's a decent question. I like it.
Thank you, Charles. The next question that has come in is, I apologize if this was already mentioned, but were additional reuse opportunities identified and implemented during your conversion?
Yes, everything surrounds reuse, and reuse is a bit of a slippery slope. I've been advocating right now in some of the communities here that we need some standardized reuse definitions. Hopefully we can get there with it, but reuse is the center of the universe, if you will. And the definitions along what reuse is are a bit nebulous, and doing the analysis finding reuse is very difficult. I think that the best reuse analysis I think I've seen was done by somebody doing their PhD dissertation, did it, and so they've got their mind made up. This is reuse, at least with them and their organization. It's a bit tough because you have reuse at the segment level when you're talking translations, but you have other levels and dimensions of reuse, whether it's page, word, segment, topic, use of variables or conditional text, etc. And measuring that is a bit elusive. At least it's been my opinion. Finding that analysis of reuse has been difficult. We've got some tools out there that'll help, but yeah, we want to reuse as much as we can, and that's really part of what you're doing when you're developing your information model, is you're trying to figure out where your reuse is. Where's the big one that you're going to get your most amount of reuse? The other stuff, I'm not a big fan of chasing after that last 15, 20% of reuse. You can do it, but do it as a hobby. Don't set your whole organization up trying to get immaculate reuse. I don't think you'll be successful. at least in an organization like mine where I've got a lot of diversity with global diversity and language diversity, I don't think it'll be worth it for you. Go after the ones that give you a really good payback, get your project funded. Certainly that's what I work on.
Great. Thank you, Charles. And thank you, everyone, for attending. This will conclude today's webinar. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archive section of our website located at www.dclab.com. Also, our next webinar will be Wednesday, July 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Precision Content Tools, Techniques, and Technology, being presented by Rob Hanna, President of Precision Content Authoring Solutions. Thank you, everyone, and you have a great day.
Thanks. Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome, Charles. Thank you.
Yep, bye.
Bye.